This is a synthetic and mendacious open university devised by Momus.
Welcome back to the University of Me, where I teach you how to be me, how to sustain failure so long that it becomes success. This is one of my rambling videos where I don't really have a theme. My girlfriend is currently on a train between Alsace and Paris, and I was meant to be walking up to the Gare de l'Est to meet her, but apparently there was a big storm last night and a lot of trees have fallen across the lines, and the estimated time of arrival keeps getting pushed back by an hour. So it was meant to be 12:30 and now it's like 3:30. So luckily she's got food and water. She's well approvisionné on the train, and she will arrive safely. And but I have time to chat with you guys on this chat platform, and I should probably eat lunch as well. I don't know. I have nothing to really address in this particular broadcast. The summer has been very hot. I'm just back from Provence. I had a week in Provence, visited some grottos with the family of my beloved, went to the family seat of the Marquis de Sade, who's possibly one of the least family-oriented people ever, and yet was very much supported by his wife. I guess his wife was a bit of an enabler. Whenever he got into trouble, his wife bribed people to shut up or change their stories, or wrote to influential people to get him off the hook. And he actually became a Republican just as the tide was turning against aristocrats like him. He became a bit of a fellow traveller with the revolution, which didn't stop and apparently influenced I think Danton, some of Danton, because of course Robespierre and Danton were the two kind of conflicting elements within the revolutionary tendency, and he influenced them both in different ways, because the Marquis de Sade really was a philosopher. You could see him setting the stage for Nietzsche and people like that in the 20th century, the 19th and 20th century. This idea that, you know, if there is no God, how do we behave? Philosophy in the boudoir, the Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor scene. A lot of his novels are not, you know, people chopping each other up for pleasure. They're actually philosophy about what you do in a world where you take responsibility for your own actions and don't believe that there's a supernatural entity behind everything. So, and really this idea of, you know, strength, the perversity of the strong, which is quite an interesting juxtaposition. It's not a Nietzschean blonde beast idea in which some people are the rightful aristocrats who get to lord it over other people by birth or for other reasons, wealth. It's more like Sade X-rays, shines a spotlight on the cruelty, corruption and perversity of the ruling class. He doesn't condemn it per se, he just illustrates it in ways which are sometimes titillating and sometimes horrifying, hence being used by people like Pasolini as a kind of signifier of fascism. Pasolini made a film called Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom, which was set in, I think, outside Lake Como in Italy, and it was an aristocratic palace where aristocrats were murdering minions for their pleasure. But for Pasolini, it had the political, metaphorical power as a symbol of fascism and fascism's contempt for human life, something we're seeing in the daily paper headlines every single day. It's all hard power. Soft power has really gone out of fashion, the ability to convince people by cool Britannia or whatever it is. It's now cruel Britannia, if anything, happening in the UK. And the world is a worse place for it, because I enjoyed soft power, even though you could see that it was a sort of propaganda effort on behalf of various governments. I still watch NHK, which is the national broadcaster, NHK World. In Japan, they try to make a kind of attractive image of Japan, showing warm-hearted people labouring away at traditional crafts with great talent and modesty, explaining their savoir-faire. And it's a delightfully, I was going to say a cracker barrel image, because often they have these sort of American accented narrators Of course, Cracker Barrel right now is the center of a cultural storm in the US over the fact that they changed their logo. I'm not really sure what the significance of that was. There was an old white man and they removed it, removed him because he wasn't diverse enough, something like that. But it's become a target for anti-DEI initiative people, in other words, MAGA people. The US I used to visit and perform in was quite a different place, much more generous place where I would generously be given visas to stay there. The Arts Council funding, which was going to, I was invited to play, speaking of playing concerts, I was invited to play in London in May of next year to headline a festival. The idea of Momus headlining any kind of festival is extraordinary, but it was like a Resonance FM organised festival, which was to be subsidised and had been in the past subsidised by the Arts Council. This year did not get its funding. Surprise, surprise, the kind of Britain where people torch asylum seekers in hotels is not the kind of place either I want to play or that wants me to play, and it gives me public money to come back to Britain. So sorry, Britain, you know, not really interested this time, and you're not interested in me either. So, you know, I guess it's I don't break out of my retirement, my live work retirement. You know, how relevant is it to play in a little place like Cafe Otto, you know, in London, in front of the same 45 people? Makes me, you know, a little slice of money, which allows me to eat for a month or so, but I don't know if I need it. I like to perform, and I feel like I can perform to this camera. That's all I really need. To have a way to contact people wherever they might be in the world without them having to pay a hefty sum. You might have to watch a couple of adverts. Sorry, YouTube is getting worse. The latest thing on the mobile YouTube is that I get a pop-up ad saying that my iPhone memory is almost full. Do I want to tidy it up? And if I click either yes or no to that, it takes me to the App Store. And my memory is not full on my iPhone. There's actually quite a lot left. So it's just a lie, and it's something that both Apple and YouTube are apparently allowing to happen. It's the fake, you know, out of memory notices. I just watched a video yesterday about how Apple has really stopped innovating, and or when it does try to innovate, like make a car or do the heads-up monitor thing, it was working. It's released as its last major innovative product, a new category of product. It sort of does it in a way that doesn't appeal to us. Again, a lack of soft power, you could say. I used to be obsessed with Apple's products. My iWatch has stopped working because, I don't know, it overheated or something, and I'm just not going to bother replacing it. I don't really need a piece of gadgetry to tell me what I already can sense about my own body. What I do know is that I need to walk every day and stay fit, and that makes me feel much better, much less stiff. You start at the age of 65, you start getting a little stiff. If I don't move my body much, I feel a bit stiff. This is what happens when I record albums, actually. If I'm lying full out, as I tend to be doing, staring at a computer, not moving my body, I get this weird trance-like immobility when I'm working on music. It happened, the last cover version I did was Destroyer Song.
Where did you get that line? Where did you get that glue? Where did you get that push off for destruction and the way you talk? Where did you get that ride? Where did you get that rocket? Where did you get that printer in your pocket?
It's marvelous working on these covers, although I do stay rather rigid when I'm doing it, and I have to exercise the next day to kind of overcome that. It's wonderful just to see the craft of a songwriter like Dan Bijar, I think he's called, who is Destroyer. He's from, I think, Vancouver. And I was vaguely aware of him having mentioned that my Tender Pervert album had been something he'd listened to in his youth and which had influenced his approach to music. I think he's a bit of a home studio guy, homemade sound. But this song, Painter in My Pocket, Painter in Your Pocket, is beautifully constructed, and does things which I would never think of doing. This is the great thing about doing cover versions, that I would normally never think of doing the type of things that people do with their songs, with their song structures. There's a bit in the middle of the Painter song which is just kind of random. The way he yelps, his style of singing really impresses me. I can't really yelp like that, and also his the guitar is actually really nice and almost like high life African guitar.
Gentlemen, my mother used to tell me when she read me up the chapter and the verse that I'd end up in the theatre or possibly somewhere even worse.
So people always go on to big things when I meet them. It's inevitable that they're going to. I should have a please pass sign of my back, because people come up, slap you on the back, say, I loved your early records or whatever, and then they overtake you and go on to glory, including my own cousin, who's suffering now very much from Parkinson's and has just published a book called The Tremolo Diaries, which I recommend. I read when it was on his website as a kind of tour diary thing. He's always been a very good acerbic writer. He's an acerbic but nice character. He's not like that in person really, but he's acerbic, critical in his stance towards the world. Nothing ever happens. Nothing happens at all. The needle returns to the start of the song and we all sing along like before. All that stuff is obviously there's a streak of black bile in him which turns into ink and turns into good writing. So buy his book, and he's been out promoting it and talking about having a tremulous hand and possibly not being able to play shows anymore at some point. I wish I could play shows at all. For some reason shows don't get offered to me. So he's fortunate in that sense. I would support Simple Minds like he was doing recently with Delamici. I guess this is the price you pay for never having penetrated to the mainstream. I mean, the things I regret, I don't really regret not having got more famous, but I regret not having met David Bowie, not having been invited, like the Divine Comedy was, for instance, to play the Meltdown Festival curated by David Bowie, and therefore meet him. There are things like that which really rankle. You don't really get into that orbit of hobnobbing with people who might have influenced you, but then, never meet your idols and all the rest of it, never meet your heroes. Maybe, I don't think I would have been disappointed in David Bowie. By all accounts, he was very polite, unless you were a hot woman like Blondie, in which case he was delightfully crude. But very nice and very considerate, and he would give you a lot of attention because you're bored. I think you're bored with your own stuff. You're bored with people telling you how much they like you. I have a weird aversion to people telling me how great I am or how much they like me. I respond much better to negative criticism. Don't take this as a cue to start attacking me, for God's sake, in the comments saying you're an asshole. But it is, one does tend to remember the negative comments more than the positive ones. I always remember Barbara Ellen, who I think is still around, writing for The Observer, although The Observer has been taken over by Tortoise Media, so I don't know, maybe they'll fire her. I have no idea, but I remember something she said about, because there was a time when I was sort of aggravating Danny Kelly, the football fan editor of the NME, in my press releases, just sort of needling people. I do that. I must be acerbic as well, like my cousin, needling people for no reason at all, and or for the fact that they were much more into football than they were into music in the 90s. And so Danny, in revenge, would set these women writers like Betty Page and Barbara Ellen on me in reviews, usually claiming how ugly I was and how monstrously misogynistic I was or whatever. Despite the fact that I live amongst women only and I love women only and all the rest of it. But Barbara Ellen started this review in the NME saying, ugly men get their misogyny with their milk teeth and Momus makes Nosferatu look like a Chippendale, which that's about as horrible as you can get. A personal ad hominem remark about, am I really that ugly? Am I really that unattractive? My life would prove otherwise. I've obviously attracted people in my life, and I'm told I have, a certain personal style, a certain charm, very selectively applied or selectively received charm. Some people don't see it at all, but you know, I think I do okay. Sometimes when you walk along the street, this is something I think about, especially in summer, when there's a kind of drowsy, flirty atmosphere on the streets, and you see women looking at you with, you know, some kind of little glitter in their eyes, and maybe they're just in a good mood that day, or maybe there's something you're doing right. I also often think that maybe I was ugly when I was younger, but that I've sort of grown into myself better. I've grown into my, I've fleshed out a little bit. I was Nosferatu at one point when I shaved my head and was very thin. And maybe I don't look like Nosferatu anymore. And that actually some of my peers, who almost all of them were more beautiful than me at one point, and I was very jealous. I wanted to be beautiful. I felt inside that I should be extraordinarily handsome. And I sang, Mike always said this once about the way I sang. He said, Nick, you sing as if you're very, very good looking, which I guess was a very backhanded compliment. But I did. I felt inside that I looked like David Bowie, you know, and the mirrors were lying, you know, if they said anything else. So I feel like I've kind of, in a weird way, I've outlasted, because I've aged quite well, I think, compared to some of my peers. And I don't say this gloatingly, because God knows, you know, people like Edwyn Collins, I used to be so jealous of Edwyn Collins, and it's so unfortunate what he's gone through, and that he doesn't look good now for very good medical reasons. You know, it would be awful to say, hey, I'm now, you know, more appealing than Edwyn Collins after what he's gone through. It would be an awful statement to make. But I do find that you know, people, even the Damon Albarns of this world, who, you know, I meet these people and I'm very jealous of them, and I can see them, they are part of the pass me please kind of thing. I can see them zooming for the top, even when they're unknown indie bands. You know, you can sort of see, I mean, he was very pretty, Damon. When I met him, I was introduced outside the Falcon in Camden Town to Damon, and he'd just played the Astoria with Blur. It was just about to rocket to the top. I think it was around the period of Modern Life is Rubbish, so they hadn't really made the big time then, but he had just started dating Brett Anderson's ex-girlfriend, Justine Frischmann, who was also the front woman in Elastica, and she and Brett had been admirers of my 80s work and had met me at a party, Jesus and Mary Chain party, and I'd taken a bit of a shine to her. Went nowhere. So, and Damon was implacably hostile. He looked at me when I was introduced to him. He looked at me with these pretty but very steely and cold blue eyes, and just said very little. And then came along with Justine later to a concert of mine at the Subterranea, and was literally drunk and throwing ashtrays at the stage. He probably doesn't remember this, but he threw stuff at the stage. Very few times I've actually had projectiles thrown at me on the stage, but it's from the best of people. Only celebrities have heckled me to that degree. Gosh, this sounds like sour grapes. It sounds like this is all just sour grapes.
And I guess this is all just sour grapes on my part. But what is my part?
Which is quite an interesting rumination. That was me trying to be Howard Devoto, another of my great heroes who I did meet. Me being Howard Devoto, you know, my position is somewhere between the waitress and her table. What is my place, or what is my part? An actor knows what the part is. If you never quite are told, you don't get the feedback that really famous people get when they're constantly interviewed and told who they are. So you never quite know who you are, but at the same time, you're not really fixed in the spotlight of that attention, and you can shift to being someone else. And that's the fun part of anonymity. Now, I have to say, I truly value anonymity very strongly. My whole life would be ruined by people, again, as the Blonde Beast song says, being recognized and stopped on the street, and being told even nice things. It's a bit of a hassle. I couldn't really ever, I don't have the kind of ego that would need that kind of constant pumping. I kind of know what I do well and what I do badly. I'm like anybody. I'm a mixture of good and bad features and habits and potentialities, and I've always thought that getting famous would make me monstrous, but also it would be irritating to be recognized so much. I'm very rarely recognized, and when it does happen, it's a pleasant enough surprise to be nice. But I wouldn't. Actually, Irvine Welsh, who's the most famous person in my extended family, who's my sister's husband, says that the main thing about being famous is that you have the ability to work, to keep working, and it's hard without any a publisher coming to you and saying please write a book, or a record label saying please make a record for us. It's really, I've never really been in that position of having nobody interested. But at the same time, it would be nice to have more possibilities and more offers, to have to do work, maybe collaborations and all the rest of it. I'm getting by. Thank you for commissioning the cover versions. That's been a help in the last few months for me to eat.
Time waits for no one, and I wish someone would care. I wish someone would care. Toy baby told the secret she conceived.
To live in central Paris, which is quite an expensive place to live. And the flat I had in Berlin, I had to close down at the end of the summer. But it's not quite the end of the summer yet, but earlier in the summer. Put my stuff in storage.
Welcome to my new Berlin apartment. This is where everyone's moving. The new trendy area of gentrification. It's out by the freeway, and it's got no windows.
Which is a bit cheaper than a rent in a place that you never use. I tended to use that maybe a couple of months a year. I left it without tears, one moves on. That was one of the flats I'd lived in the longest, actually, or on paper anyway. It was 7 years I'd been there, which is for me a long time. I was only 5 years in Chelsea in central London from 85 to 90. I was only a couple of years on my first trip, my first period in Paris in the 90s, a couple of years in New York, quite a long time in Osaka, but in various different flats. But it all adds up. And I remember being 25 and thinking it's only 15 years until I'm 40. And that was a really scary thought, because 40 seemed really over the hill. Your life was finished, or at least it was en route in a way that a 25-year-old finds scary. Things would be decided. I think Bowie said after 40 you either sink or swim. And then Iggy Pop said after 50 your body starts breaking down. All these things are actually just bullshit. I think you both sink and swim at various points. I mean, Bowie himself sank artistically several times after 40. But so yeah, it's fine. It's fine aging. It's not been a traumatic experience for me. And I get by, and I love being anonymous. I love being unknown and undervalued even. It's not bad. As Irv says, it's the ability to keep working that counts. And when you're making a vlog, the ability to keep talking, which I've somehow managed to do for, how many minutes is this? 22 minutes. So I'll speak to you next time. Those are just sort of random thoughts of a Momus waiting for his girlfriend's train, which is blocked by fallen trees.
Open University.
Darkness falls across the land. Creatures crawl in search of blood. The demons squeal in sheer delight. The midnight hour is close at hand. Try to run, you try to scream, but no more sun you'll ever see. For evil reaches from the crypt to crush you in its icy grip. The foulest stench is in the air, and grisly ghouls from every tomb are closing in to seal your doom. And though you fight to stay alive, your body starts to shiver, for no mere mortal can resist the evil of
The open University.